Welcome to the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom with Dan Breslin.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Show with Steve Budzik on high volume, high dollar house flipping and specialty real estate brokerage. I'm Dan Breslin and host of the REI Diamond Show. I'm dedicated to helping you discover new ways to increase, multiply, and protect your net worth. Each week, I invite a high-caliber performer to share their unique experience as it relates to real estate investing. This week's guest is Steve Budzik of Eye Candy Realty, located in Mokena, Illinois, a suburb just outside of Chicago. Eye Candy Realty and Eye Candy Homes specialize in flipping single-family houses the right way. With a background in construction and the experience of flipping more than 60 houses, Steve is going to share with you his insights on determining the ARV and his superior process for marketing and selling the renovated and/or new construction homes, many before the construction is even complete. Steve is also going to share his unique experience with design and layout. Again, expertise gained through buying, building, and reselling homes priced anywhere from a couple $100,000 to well over $1 million. Steve is the managing broker of Eye Candy Realty and currently manages 12 agents. His goal for 2016 is to accept 10 more agents onto his team, maybe even someone listening to the show right now. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate that. I have to say I enjoy your weekly podcast. You are always exceeding my expectations for everybody on the show, and you definitely give some great information. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that. It's amazing to me. I get the chance to meet, some of the listeners, and the most successful listeners that I meet who are already successful. I'm not trying to take credit and say that it's our show that's educating people, but the most successful people listened to the most shows or currently listen to the most shows, or if not all of the shows. Whereas the people who are like kind of just getting started, and a lot of times they found like one or two episodes and they kind of gave it a half-hearted listen, those are usually the people that are like sort of confused. So I'm going to venture to guess that a guy like you or some of the other people who I've met who are high caliber performers in their field already just have like an appetite for knowledge and wisdom that's just insatiable. I mean, am I correct in that assumption, Steve? Is that something that somebody maybe could develop as a strategy for success, you think?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And as I got into real estate only 4 short years ago, that was definitely my mindset. My mindset was all I wanted to do was learn, and I wasn't totally focused on the earning aspect. And that allowed me to just succeed at a much faster pace than a lot of other people. And, I say that very humbly because I didn't make any money. And in fact, it probably costed me a few thousand or thousands of dollars my first few years in real estate. And I'm not advising people to do that because at that point, I don't even believe that you have a business, but I knew nothing. And the information that I learned within 4 years, I am so thankful and grateful for. But that was my whole mindset, Dan, is how much can I learn? How much value can I provide? And the amount of opportunities that created with that mindset alone has, just blown me away. And I still have that mindset with having money as not being the top driving force in my business. You have to do what you love. And obviously you have to make money, right? But I look at it more of the money being a byproduct of the value or exchange that you're providing. So I couldn't agree with you more, Dan. And I mean, even someone like yourself, who I know you lived in Philadelphia and you came down to Chicago. And I mean, I have to say, I talk to other people, and there's a lot of people that know you in a short amount of time that you have been here, and I feel like you have done that as well by creating value, whether it be in the podcasts or the meetups or just the hardcore networking that you do. That makes all of the difference.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And one of the things when I got started too, so it's easy to look at a guy like you or a guy like me, 4 years, 10 years in the business. We've been here a while. We make it look easy. It's like, oh man, that guy just really stepped into a pile and he met the right people, and it just like as if the success happened by chance. Like we played the lottery and that's how we got to the point that we're at today. But the reality is back in 2006, I had no car, no money. I had bad credit. And I remember my dad kind of helped me get started. So I got to give him some credit. He pulled the trigger on a seminar, a series of seminars, somewhere in the $6,000 to $10,000 range. And when he did it, I was in awe. I was in shock that my dad did that for me, because at the time I'm like, this is an outrageous amount of money. And as I was going through these seminars, gaining the expertise and the knowledge, and again, I'm not suggesting to run out and spend 6, 10, 15 grand with, the latest seminar company that's on tour. But as I went through those seminars, I gained access to some knowledge fast, well-organized knowledge in specific orders, so that when I did come around to the networking events, even back in 2006, and I had to get a ride and dropped off there because I didn't even have a car, I had the vocabulary and I had communication skill set to talk to people immediately who I still do business with to this day. I have, lenders who I met at that first networking event, which was actually called the Ring Meeting, and I just kind of took the Ring Meeting over after it closed down for a little while in Philadelphia, that I still do business with to this day, buyers that I still do business with to this day. And that was as a result of having that knowledge. And I remember it was a whole summer, and I remember I was reading real estate books. I would sit there and I would read the dictionary of real estate terms. I didn't even know what exactly I was supposed to be gaining the knowledge from, and there weren't many podcasts and things of that nature in 2006 when I got started. So books were pretty much it. You would go to Borders and you would, hopefully find something on the shelf there that landed the right information. So people are much more lucky with resources available at low or no cost to saturate their mind with that knowledge. You mentioned the top driving force not being money in your life, and I want to know how you got started too in real estate. But first, I'd like you to answer that question. What would be Steve Budzik's top driving force in real estate right now?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. And it's such an important aspect, and it's such an important mindset. I don't know really why I ever had this view, and maybe when I run through my background, but money was just never something that I really looked at, and I wasn't the guy who checked my bank account daily or the guy that was trying to, squeeze an extra $20 out of a side job. I really, really came from the place of really wanting to create value and really wanting to help people. I mean, I've done, I think like a lot of younger people, and in my 20s, I was doing side jobs, whether that was construction or buffing boats or washing cars or detailing cars. And I was never the most expensive, but I always felt that I exceeded the client or the consumer's expectation. And I really felt that it was, it was my duty to do that. It was my duty to be the best that I could be and not necessarily have to charge the most. Now, some people will say, well, Steve, that's not very smart or business savvy. But what I can tell you is that the amount of business that I created by having that mindset totally exceeded what I could have made by charging an extra $10, $20, $100, or $1,000 for the specific job that or task that I was doing for the client or the consumer. So I hope that kind of maybe answers the question. But yeah, absolutely.
And that's an interesting take, because I know over the past several years here for me, so in the beginning, I've had some partners and I made some money, and it was up and down and it was not necessarily consistent. And I'm sure that people on the call, even yourself, have seen people in the business, kind of make a little money and then they sort of disappear and go back to whatever they were doing. And then there's a handful of people who become consistently successful in real estate because it's a little bit challenging. And I made that transition. Back then it was the only way I knew to make my way, to make money. I mean, I had come from a construction background too. I was, wiring houses, brand new construction houses at the age of 12 with my dad. He had like a contracting company. That was really where the dream for me was born, was on the job site as an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, kind of tagging along with my dad. So my mom would send me to go with your dad for the day. And then I'd be on the job site and have nothing else to do but learn how to wire the house or, sweep the construction site, whatever it was. So when I got into real estate, I did start making money. And I think I look back and I'm guilty of having that thought, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I think it's important because there's probably some people who would think, you know what, yeah, I think it's all about the money too, and it's hard not to necessarily go after the money first if you don't have enough money to pay your bills. But I can say that it was pretty much about the money back then. And now I've gotten to a point in my career where I've learned to put the value first. I mean, I teach people how to wholesale, like, absolutely for free. I offer the book I wrote. I'm really, like, putting my best foot forward and providing the value first. And I know that there's people who will come back around full circle and do business with our company as a result of that. But it's not necessarily like I'm sitting there with an accounting record and seeing like, hey, I gave you this thing, you know, you're supposed to bring a deal. So I just put all that value out there first, and on the podcast, obviously the same way. And it's a little bit scary to have like let the reins off because, you know, I do some wholesaling. I flip houses myself in Philadelphia and starting to get into it here in Chicago. And it's a little scary for me to think that I'd, you know, train my competition and then, you know, make my own opportunity disappear. So that was a challenge I had with providing as much value as I possibly could aside from these podcasts. But as a result of that, there's a few people in my life now. I have an assistant, and, you know, the assistant's buying a house as a result of the stable work that comes through Diamond Equity Investments. And that's like fulfilling on another level, to like be able to provide opportunities for people to do business, or people to make incomes, or people to participate in deals, or new wholesalers to get paid out on their very first deal without any hassle or aggravation. Not only paid out, but paid out with a fair assignment fee. The way I treat people is I want to put a check in your hand as fast as possible, so that we continue doing business going forward. That's the easiest way to get somebody, you know, to get somebody's attention, is to get them paid. I love it. I love to create value first. But enough about me on my side there, Steve. Why don't you tell us how you got started in the real estate business?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. So again, like I mentioned, 4 short years ago, I got started in real estate. How did I get started? I think like a lot of people, I went to that first seminar, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I went to their free seminar in Oak Brook, which led me to their $199 for the 3-day mini boot camp, which again led me into a much larger package after that. And, you know, I think a lot of people fall into that exact sequence of events right there. And, you know, at the end of the day, I met a lot of people through those networking. And in fact, that's where I met, you know, Kirby, John, and Janelle, who are the owners of Eye Candy Homes. And a lot of people, you know, discount some of those networking events. They didn't work, or, you know, it was just more of a theory and it didn't work. And, you know, they give you all these reasons of why it didn't work. But I took the opportunity for what it was, and I made the best of it. You know, was it the best education out there? You know, hands down, you know, maybe not, but look at the opportunity that I was able to create. So that's how I got started, you know, 4 short years ago. Before that, you know, when I graduated high school, my mom had my family had a family business of auto industry, of repairing cars, CarStar, which is a franchise. They're located in Bolingbrook. And I never was a big fan of school. And I really want to give this podcast or this interview from the perspective of, you know, it's not as perfect, or it's not as this ball of sunshine that entrepreneurs look, and they give you this, you know, some guys give you the fluffy story. I want to give you the true story of exactly what happened. And I want to really inspire other people to see that, you know what, I can do that. You know, I didn't get straight A's in high school. In fact, I failed a lot of my classes, and I didn't like school at all. And I really didn't go to, a typical college. So I graduated high school at 18, like a lot of other kids. I started working right away, and I was working for my mom. About a month into the summer, I got an opportunity to get into construction. That opportunity was to make $29 an hour. And just to put it into perspective, I'm 30 years old now. So that was, 12 years ago, to make $29 an hour, get into the union, work 40-plus hours a week, have the best benefits. I mean, I was literally making more money than a family of, you know, someone who had a job for 20-plus years. So I was very fortunate for that. Again, just being around great people, surrounding yourself by great people, opportunities will come by. So I took that. I was in construction. I was working for a general contracting outfit, large outfit called Leopardo, which is based out of Huffman Estates in Chicago. And again, I got hooked up with a superintendent who just really liked me as a person. And me as a person, when I was young, I wasn't as much of a talker as I am now. You told me what to do and I did it. And I feel that people seen that. And I wasn't like the rest of the other crew or the rest of the other team. And the superintendent just really took a liking to me. So I worked with him for about a good straight 3 years of my, 4.5 years in construction. I learned so much working hand in hand with him. I mean, we were on high rises. We were doing, 30,000 square foot build outs for companies like Canon. Just amazing opportunities. And I was able to learn and see projects from the start of being involved in the demo all the way to the finish when the final clean was going on. And I was able to talk to all the tradesmen and so on. So that really helped me in my real estate career at this point, or at that point. I never really knew I was going to be in real estate. From there, I just wanted more out of life. I wanted more opportunity. And so I got into the medical field. My father actually worked in a hospital, but funny enough, he was more in the maintenance department. He was an in-house electrician. And so I was able to get my foot in the door. I went to EMT school. Again, not really your typical college, but I went to EMT school and I started working as an ER technician. So I was in there. I was in Berwyn. For you guys who know where Berwyn is, not the greatest of town, and we get shootings, we get stabbings. There's a lot of gangs over there, and so I got to see a lot of good stuff. I was on the midnight shift, worked 12-hour shifts, and from there I was like, you know what, I want to again have some more action. So I went to firefighter school. At the same time, I went to go get my paramedics license. So I did that. I started working on the ambulance, and I did a lot of ride time in the city, and it was awesome, and I learned so much, and it really improved my communication skills. Because let me tell you one thing, when you're in the back of the ambulance and you're calling in that not-so-good call, you better be calm, clear, and concise. Because when you get to the hospital, that nurse will chew you out if you didn't give a good, solid report. So it forced me to break outside of my shell, and it forced me to be a good communicator. And so I did that for a while, and you know what, I wasn't really happy. I just wanted more out of life. I wanted more growth. I didn't want somebody to have a ceiling. And so, again, I came across this event in Oak Brook for Rich Dad, and I went there, and I loved it. And at that point, it really showed me that, wow, there's a lot more opportunity in life overall. And so as I started, I went to that, which led me to the 3-day event for $199, which led me to a bigger package, which, again, is where I met Kirby, John, and Janelle at a foreclosure seminar over in Arlington Heights. And again, I just wanted to learn. I wanted to learn from people. I wasn't afraid to go up and talk. And I met Kirby. We went out to lunch. And for those of you listening to the call, if you know Kirby, John, and Janelle, you know that they're truly great people. And that's what I seen. And they were willing to give me the knowledge that they had at that point. And so I can never thank them enough, because as I approached them and said, what can I do for you? They said, here, you can do these tasks. And I never asked for any money. I never asked for anything. I came into their office and I just started working. Their office over in Mokina, like Dan said. As I started, I was putting up bandit signs on the side of the road, and I was screening the calls. I was taking the leads that didn't work for rehab, and I was turning them into a traditional listing. I was taking the people that were underwater on their property, more of in a short sale situation, and I was listing those, and we were putting in the offer as Eye Candy Homes being the cash buyer, and just the opportunity just really started to snowball. But more importantly was what I've learned was just, you can't learn more when you're doing it hands-on. And that's the type of person I am. I'm a hands-on learner, and I feel that in real estate, because there are so many variables and so many different situations, you really learn 10 times more hands-on than you do reading a book. It's just the way it is. It's why doctors have a 4-year residency, because you can read books till you're blue in the face, but you've got to get in the mud. You know what I'm saying? And I know, Dan, you can definitely attest to that. And so that's how I got started. And, 4 years later, never looked back, just moving forward every day, creating new opportunities. Like I said before, I love what I do, and I love the people that I work with. And I really think that is the most important thing to have in the back of your mind for anybody that's starting off. I think, Dan, you said it, again, a lot of people are, kind of gravitate towards the money. And I have to say, there was parts of my life where I was that person, but I was just fortunate that, I came from a family. Listen, my parents weren't rich, but, I had clothes, I had a place to sleep. I had a lot of things that everybody has that are listening to this call. And so it allowed me not to, per se, focus on the money. And I, again, am fortunate. I was making $29 an hour when I was 18 years old. I mean, 18-year-olds at that time were lucky if they were making, $10 an hour. Most of them were going to college, so they weren't making any money. So the money aspect was just never something that, I always had, at least, which isn't a lot of money, I'm not saying, but I always had a few $1,000, whether it was $5,000 or $7,000 in my bank account, which, again, I'm not saying that that's a lot of money, but for people that have nothing, $5,000 to $7,000 is a lot of money. So that was a short answer on how I got started, Dan.
No, that was perfect. You mentioned Kirby. Kirby was on the show previously, so I will make sure to insert the other episode for Kirby and Eye Candy Homes in the show notes. So if anyone's interested, they could check out some of the backstory. So let's just give a quick picture of, how Eye Candy Realty and Eye Candy Homes, give us a today's picture. What's going on today? What kind of deals are being done today? And how does your company and Eye Candy Realty and Eye Candy Homes, how do they work together, and just kind of give us a visual picture so that when we get to the other pieces, we can tie that in and everyone will understand the frame of experience based on what the business looks like today.
Absolutely, Dan. And, when I got my real estate license, probably about 3.5 years ago, maybe a little under, my whole vision was to, have this brokerage. From day one, I definitely wanted this. And you can't become managing broker or manage any agents until you at least have your license for 2 years, at which point you can take the managing broker state test or exam, and then you become a managing broker. So how do Eye Candy Realty and Eye Candy Homes work together? Well, we work very closely. In fact, our offices are connected. We opened up a doorway so that we can communicate easier and just walk back and forth through our office. But Eye Candy Homes is the investment company. They're the buyer. They're the developer. And Eye Candy Realty is really the one that is selling the product or the sale on the back end, and doing a lot of the risk analysis, running the comps, what needs to be done to the property in order to sell it at the price point that we're giving it, and so on. And so, again, we're screening leads all day, right? Eye Candy Homes is doing marketing. Eye Candy Realty is the one that is screening these leads. We kind of have a acquisitions division within more Eye Candy Realty side, and we're running comps. We're talking to sellers. We're talking to other agents. We're talking to other wholesalers. We're every day we're screening leads, and we're looking to see what is going to fit their business model. Eye Candy Homes has a full-time estimator. They have full-time project managers. So when Eye Candy Realty finds something and says, hey, guys, good opportunity, they get their estimator to go out there. He runs all the repair numbers. If a project manager is available and the deal looks super solid, they will accompany the estimator to, again, make sure that the numbers can really be solid, at which point Eye Candy Realty is creating a realtor ARV package that's delivered to the project manager, again, so that there is good communication. Because, Dan, I can't tell you how much I see this where, one person puts you can sell the property for $200,000 or $300,000, and they do the work and they list it for $200,000 or $300,000, whatever the ARV was, and it doesn't sell. Well, there's a reason why it didn't sell, and so it's very important for the person who's determining what the property is going to sell for that it actually looks like or is similar to the comps that they were using, or in some cases even better, right? Because in Chicago, we've got an up market and a down market. In springtime, the market's great. In the wintertime, the market's a little slower. So you got to be thinking well in advance to say, if this is going to be a winter listing, I'm going to have to give this a little more pop. I'm going to have to be better than my competition because I know that there's not as many buyers. And so when there are those buyers and I have other competition, other rehabs on the market, I want mine to sell first. So how do I do that? So it's very important to have a lot of foresight, and we're all about planning at iCandy Homes and iCandy Realty. So again, iCandy Homes being the developer, the investor, iCandy Realty being the brokerage who is selling the project when it is complete. That is the dynamic of how we work hand in hand together.
Got it. So on a small, simple scale for like a real estate agent and a normal investor client, this is very common what you're describing, probably not as highly systematized, but an agent, so realty, we'll say your side, iCandy Realty is realty, and homes is iCandy Homes. So realty is searching for inventory all the time, kind of putting offers in, and then sort of bringing the inventory back to homes and saying, hey, we found a deal. And this is just like a regular agent would be searching on the MLS for REO inventory or whatever the case is in a particular investor's neighborhood, and they would bring it to the investor and say, hey, I have this listing. And then the investor makes the offer, buys it, which would be what Homes does from realty, and realty could make that front end piece of the commission. And then on the flip side, a lot of agents who bring inventory to investors have either a defined expectation or some pre-negotiated arrangement, and part of the benefit for them oftentimes bringing these flippable opportunities, deals that are good enough for the investor to make a profit. Most of the time that agent has expectation or the agreement to get that listing on the flip side. So it sounds like you at iCandy Realty and iCandy Homes are doing that on a much larger scale, correct? That's kind of the business model, but it's increased and blown up in size and volume?
Absolutely, Dan, absolutely. You nailed it on the head.
Cool. So let's talk about first the ARV package. So can you give us kind of a rundown, maybe a few danger zones or something that, some of the people on the call know how to determine ARVs, and, maybe like your perspective on it, whether it's conservative or just fill me in on that ARV, determining the ARV.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny because I could probably talk about this for 8 hours straight, no lie, and the details and the variables. But just some brief, short points is, one thing that we've done is we've looked at, obviously we know there's a lot of variables in real estate when you're selling your property. In fact, we've written down every single variable that we can think of, and right now we've got an Excel spreadsheet with about 75 different variables. Now, these variables are more important on the higher end projects. Like Dan, you said earlier, we have homes that we've sold completed rehabs for as little as, $77,000 over in South Holland. And, one of our larger ones, which is in Glencoe, for $1.7 million. And when you're running, or determining an ARV, when you're looking in the blue collar areas and you're looking at the ranches or the split levels or the 2 stories, and you're in the price point of, that 100 to 300, it is 10 times easier because a lot of the homes are cookie cutter, right? They're all, a ranch is a ranch. There's only, you can't slice it more than 3 or 4 different ways. You knock down some walls, you open up the floor plan. Does it have a finished basement? It's pretty simple. But when you get into more of these complex, higher end values, let me tell you, there's a lot more variables. And these end buyers are savvy buyers. These are not your first time home buyers. These people have a lot of money, and there's a reason why they have a lot of money. It's most because they are very just savvy individuals. And so when we look at determining the ARV, like I said, on the lower end price points, it's pretty easy. You've got your standard. You're looking at your similar bed bath count, square footage. You're pulling comps that are in the same town, right? You're paying attention to school districts. You're looking at, is it brick siding or stucco? What's the curb appeal? What year built? Basement, is it full partial? Does it have no basement? Is your garage, what's your garage? What's your heating like? Do you have boiler heat? Do you have forced AC? Do you have a master bedroom, right? It's very important. And what's the market time in that area, right? Are you trying to flip a house in Crete where inventory's, more of an 8 to 12 month inventory? Or are you somewhere like Downers Grove where you're 4.5, 5 months of inventory in a much healthier market? Home style, right? Making sure that you're looking at similar home style, that you're not taking a ranch and comparing it to a 2-story or a split level, because the dynamic of the whole house is completely different. And I see this time and time again with newer investors, and it's fine. It's just something that you have to learn. The one thing that I tell everybody, if you want to determine the ARV, learn your home styles. That is number one. You have to know the difference between a split level with a sub-basement, a Cape Cod, which is a 1.5-story, not a true 2-story, 2-story where you have full 7 or 8 foot ceilings on the second floor. Your Cape Cod, you're going to lose that headroom unless you have it dormered out. And then your ranches, right? You've got ranches on a slab. You've got ranches that are on hills with, full basements, and all the different variables that go into that. So you've got to know all of that, because that is going to play such a huge role in selling the property. Now, when you get into the higher end properties, right, $1 million, or I even say anything above $600,000, you better be looking at all of the variables, because your buyers are just much more picky. They want everything and then some. So when you're looking at these higher end properties, you're starting to look at, all right, you take a town like Glen Ellen. Glen Ellen is a very healthy market. Glen Ellen, or even Elmhurst, it's more of an upscale suburb outside of Chicago, and these homes sell anywhere from $400,000 to $2 million, depending on your size and your finish. And I'll tell you one thing, when you're running the comps, you will see newer investors, or just even investors in general, they will discount a property that is not updated. And you can't do that in those towns like Glen Ellen or Elmhurst, because I'll tell you one thing, a buyer or an owner in Glen Ellen or Elmhurst is going to not think twice about putting $20,000 to $50,000 into their kitchen. They're not going to think twice about putting $20,000 to $50,000 into their hardscape or their outdoor landscaping. Well, an investor who's flipping a property, they're not putting $20,000 or $50,000 into a kitchen. So that kitchen that may be 5 to 7 years old, it still has a high value, and it still was a $20,000 or a $50,000 kitchen. So you can't discount that and say, well, it's not rehab, so it doesn't count. Because let me tell you, when you go there and you feel the doors and you look at the layout and you look at just the craftsmanship, the quality of the cabinets, it's probably going to exceed what that flipper or that investor is putting into his subject property. So it's very, very crucial to be looking at all of those aspects. And that's what we do a great job of. We shop the market out. We look, we see what's out there. We actually, even on the back end when we're selling these properties, we have a spreadsheet of all of the feedback from the agents or the buyers, and we log that so that we can look back and we can say, all right, here was all the negatives of this house. Let's make sure we don't have that again, whether it's digging out a basement, making sure a living room is bigger when you're designing a floor plan, and so on. So again, like I said, Dan, I could probably talk about 8 hours, and I feel like that's where the value comes in with, other investors working with us, is we're able to give them this information and create this realtor ARV package, which outlines exactly what needs to be done to the property in order for it to sell for the price point that is projected.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things. And I have another question I want to back up to, but you have done that, and I do that for people in my markets as well. And I'm not a specialist in the $600,000, $800,000, $900,000 $1 million plus market. I'm fish out of water. I specialize in the lower stuff, a little easier to comp. That's where I buy and fix and sell properties. I have rental properties in those price points. So my motto is a little bit different. And when I come across something on the high end, as well as I do, I'm on the phone with you and we're having a discussion, or you run out and take a look at the property and tell me, this thing's not worth $1 million. It's worth more like $700,000. Here's why, X, Y, and Z. And now it makes sense. You have 75 variables. You're looking at the feedback, and you guys have already invested, certainly on the home side of things, several $1 million at any given time. I mean, what would be that number right now that's currently invested in house inventory, would you say?
iCandy Homes, I believe the number is around $12 million. I think that's about right. And that's purchase and rehab. There's about $12 million out working right now.
And you had mentioned 75 or so variables on a project in a spreadsheet. I wanted you to name for me the 3 variables that negatively impact a property.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, when you're looking in the higher end market, I'm going to say the first one is, without being the obvious, right? If you're in a floodplain, that's going to just totally crush you. And the reason for that is FEMA changed their guidelines about a year ago. And basically what FEMA does, long story short, what FEMA is, they are basically going to take every property that's in a floodplain and they are going to turn it into vacant land in the next, I would say, about 200 years. And the reason why I say 200 years is because FEMA is putting a cap on the amount of improvements that you can do to a property in a floodplain. Now this cap is actually recorded on the title of the property. So there's a certain percentage that you can only improve the property. Now, when that percentage runs out, you no longer can improve the property. So when you need to get a permit for windows because your windows are leaking, or you need a permit for a roof, you can't get the permit. And so what's eventually going to happen is these homes are going to turn into vacant land as they basically fall apart. Now, are people going to do things without a permit? Or are they going to work the system? Absolutely are. Is every village going to be a stickler like, Wheaton? No, but, that's my envision. So floodplain is number one. Number two is being on a corner lot. Corner lot is really going to hurt you. People buying a $600,000-$700,000 home, they want privacy, and you don't get a whole lot of privacy. And we even see a discount in ARV on the lower end properties as far as the $200 or $300 sales. It's a tougher sale because of the lack of privacy, and that's the number one complaint. I've had buyers pull up to the property and say they didn't even go in the house. It was a corner lot. They turned right around. The third one would be just being on a busy street in general. When you're on a busy street, again, people spending any amount of money, most people have kids. And if you have kids and you're on a busy street, the mother, the wife, she's going to freak out. So those would be the top 3, with one more because the floodplain is kind of a given. And that last one is being close to multifamily. In any area, when you're close to multifamily, people don't like it. In the lower end areas, it brings a lot of crime. It brings a lot of riffraff. It just brings a lot of traffic in general, and people dislike that. They dislike looking out their window and staring at a multifamily. It's just the way it is. So those would be the top, I named 4, but the top 3 variables to look out for.
I have a great list going here, and I know that the corner lot is one that most uneducated or unexperienced people in real estate, and even some that might be real estate somewhat savvy or experienced, are thinking, oh, I thought the corner lot was a positive. Everybody wanted a corner lot, and that's not the case, right, Steve?
Not the case. And, there's always that one corner lot that you can say that this is okay. And that is, actually the home that I grew up in was on a corner lot, and fortunately, I was the one that sold it. I literally sold the house in 12 hours on the MLS for like 99% of asking price about, 4 years ago or 3.5 years ago, as soon as I got my license. And the reason why that property sold was, not because we had a discount because it was on a corner lot, but it was very, very quiet. I mean, it was tucked away in a very quiet subdivision. And the way the house was positioned, it was unique in the fact that the outdoor hardscape was still was a very private. And it was because the way the house was shaped that it kind of wrapped around, and it had created this little nook for the $20,000, patio that my parents put in the property. So other than that, 9 times out of 10, corner lot is going to be definitely going to be negative.
Let's shift gears here a little bit. And you had mentioned that I'm sure that the design of the rehab and the selling and marketing probably come into play all at once. Would that be the right assumption, Steve?
Absolutely, Dan, 100%.
So we're going to dive into that, and I guess we'll start with when you guys are going into a project and you were working on these 60 renovations, number 59, 60, number 58, 57, you had a different design strategy going in, which was the result, obviously, of the lessons learned on the first 56. Can you talk about some of those, the 3 most impactful design lessons that you learned toward the end there, and maybe, you know, identify the price points that those lessons were learned on and if they would be applicable across all the price points?
Yeah, for sure, Dan. You know, and first thing is you've got to look at your team. You've got to see who is your team composed of. You know, is it composed of, you know, nothing against, but is it composed of, again, of a bunch of, you know, guys who may not be the best at picking out paint colors, picking out finishes for your product on $1 million home? Or is it have some females? Or do you have a full-time designer? iCandy Homes, you know, on these $1 million properties, they hire a designer, you know, and it comes at a very expensive cost per se. But in the long run, is it really expensive? Because she is delivering a scope of work of the finishes of a beautiful, beautiful project. From picking out the paint colors to the cabinets to the design of the kitchen, right? We never, you know, some guys were working with an architect maybe, and you're like, yeah, just, you know, you put the sink there and you put the dishwasher there, and you're not even thinking of it, where she's thinking of, all right, you know, we need 2 dishwashers in this house because this house is going to be, you know, full of entertainers, and we need 2 garbage cans, and here's where the garbage cans are going to go, and here's where the prep sink's going to go, and here's why this is going to go here in the butler's pantry. And so she's going through and she's really outlining everything of the finishes. Now, she's not an architect, so she's not per se designing the floor plan. So you still have to know exactly what type of floor plan is selling. And, you know, it's pretty easy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Go out and see what the new construction guys are doing. And this can be a challenge on rehabs because you have variables that you can't just knock down everything. You know, you're not building a new house. iCandy Homes is yet to do a ground up new construction from pouring a new foundation, you know, all the way up to 2.5 stories. A lot of these homes are renovations of an existing footprint, which means that you have to work in those guidelines. And so that can be sometimes challenging. So you work around that, but you've got to look at the floor plans that are selling, right? The kitchen, combo, living room, and you've got your dining room and your study, your half bath on your first floor. You know, that's in your mud room. That's your typical new construction. So you're shopping the competition. You're seeing what's working, what's not working, and you're working with a designer to pick out finishes for your higher end project. And on your lower end stuff, can you get away with using people like from Floor & Decor? You know, Floor & Decor has got a great opportunity for you guys, for investors to go there, and they'll help you design your bathrooms, help you pick out the backsplash for your kitchen. I mean, they are very, very helpful. So if you're afraid because maybe you're not the expert at design, that's fine. Utilize the free resources that are out there, but make sure you're paying a professional for your higher end projects. And the one thing that you don't want to do is put your opinion in it. Don't do what you think looks good, because let me tell you, that's not what everybody else likes. You want to do what everyone else is doing. You want to do what's, you know, appeasing to the masses out there. You're casting the widest web on your design, and you can't impress everybody. You know, people are going to hate white cabinets. Well, unfortunately, the 9 other people that walk through the home love the white cabinet. So white cabinet is what it's going to be. So I hope that kind of answered your questions, Dan, on the floor plan.
What would be 1 or 2 big mistakes in design that you actually made and you're like, oh my gosh, just from the feedback that you have on that spreadsheet you mentioned, what would be the number 1 or number 2 mistake in design?
You know, curb appeal is going to be number 1. People don't want to buy an ugly house, especially, again, like I said, you get up to that, you pass that $300,000 mark, and people do not want to buy an ugly house. So that would be the one thing where you want to make sure you're addressing. You want to make sure you're really spending some time. And if you have an architect, that's where the architect's going to come into play. Architects are supposed to design the exterior of the property, but you can use other resources like Menards, Home Depot, just looking at house, talking to your contractor. I mean, you can really use a lot of free sources. So that would be number 1. And number 2 would be that when you're looking at blueprints or you're designing something on paper, it is totally different when you actually get and you feel the space, when you're standing in the space. So I think it's very important that you're designing it to the best that you can, what you have to work with, right? Making the room as large as you possibly can without, shrinking your study or shrinking your dining room. But when you're going in the property and you've got your carpenter there and you're doing the framing, it's very important to get a feel for that space. And at that time is maybe when you might make some small changes, right? Let's move this wall over a little bit here because I just don't have room to put my TV. I have no wall space to put my couch, right? Where's my furniture going? I think a lot of guys get in the habit of just, make it an open concept. And an open concept is great, but you got to put furniture in that open concept. So those would be kind of some of the lessons learned as far as design.
Nice. So you guys have, and I just know this just based on experience and talking with you, you have sold many of these projects before the construction is complete, right, Steve?
Absolutely, Dan.
So how does that process take place? What marketing plan is Eye Candy Realty implementing to pre-sell a rehab? Because that's something that, I have not done that personally. We usually finish it, put it on the MLS with a nice description, staged with furniture, and then we have time on market. So I'm interested to know what this process looks like.
Yeah, 100%. And, I take a lot of pride in this, and I'm proud of this as well because, as you know, Dan, time is money to an investor. So if you can get the end product sold quicker, that is more money in their pocket. Staging isn't cheap, right? You've got companies like Phoenix Rising. They're charging $3,000 for the first 3 months. That's their contract. And it can really start to add up with just paying the utilities, the taxes, the insurance, the staging, your hard money cost, any additional cost that you're paying to hold this project. So what we do is we start, every project is going to be a little bit different. If we've got a project that we've got floor plans on, we are going to pre-market that property on sites like Zillow and Trulia right away. We've got the floor plan, so we get a 3D rendering of the exterior, and we put it up on those sites. We put the floor plans on there. We give a description of exactly what we're doing, always creating mystery, right? Call before the crowd arrives, call to get your private showing, luxury renovation, pick out your finishes. We're putting this information so that when these buyers are looking, you remember 80% of buyers, it works backwards. What the buyer does nowadays is they go on Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, they go on these sites, they look for a house, then they call an agent, then they call a lender. It's totally backwards. Buyers are supposed to get pre-approved, call a realtor, then go do showings. And so it's backwards, but it works in our benefit because these buyers are searching these sites. And so then they call us directly sometimes, or they have an agent call us, and we're able to do that showing. But throughout the whole entire project, we're taking updated pictures, right? And we're not taking pictures with our iPhone. No offense against anybody that uses the iPhone to take pictures, but we've got expensive equipment, and it's able to showcase the property. So every few weeks or benchmarks, depending on where the status of the project is, we're going out there, we're taking updated pictures. We've got a sign out in the front yard that says coming soon. We're doing mass mailings to all the agents in the area, especially as the home is getting closer to completion. We're doing brokers open, getting really close to the completion of the project being done. What we're doing is open home preview. And so what we do is we've got this huge banner, Floor and Decor banner. I think you've seen it, Dan, over at Dundee when we had our Christmas party. And we set up shop, and what that does is we invite the neighbors, we invite everybody. It's an open house, but the project is not completed yet. And why do we do this is because everybody loves seeing properties that are being renovated. They gravitate towards that. And so it allows us to get the neighbors in. It allows us to mingle and pick up more business and get feedback from the neighbors. Maybe they know somebody that's looking to buy, and other agents are able to come and really see the product. Now, at this point, it's not done, or maybe it's very close to being done. But people like being in that environment, and they gravitate towards that. So those are just some of the things that we do in our, we've got a 20-point process on pre-marketing the property. And giving you long story short, that's those are some of the bullet points of what we do, and it works. I mean, we sell quite a few of our projects well before they're done, which allows for no staging, no final picks, and obviously less days on market because the lender's able to start, get in there and do the appraisal, and, the home inspector's able to get in there the day it's done, and so it speeds up the process.
And because you're only putting your pre-marketing is on Zillow or Truly, it's not on the MLS, so you don't have days on market, right?
That is correct. And Dan, we're thinking of making a slight shift because once you get into the $1 million price point, we're seeing that a lot more people are putting the home on the MLS once it's closer to completion. So we are going to go that route in addition to all of the other marketing. But at this time, we have sold all of our properties without using the MLS.
The price point. What price point does this not work, or do you do this on, every deal that comes through?
Yeah, every deal, it's just different. It's a different stage, right? It really depends on, are we getting a full set of plans and permits? Are we getting permits? How much attention do we want to draw to this property? So some of the properties, we're not getting full permits for everything. We're getting permits for the work that we're doing, but we don't want a ton of attention to be drawn, and so we want to usually we're waiting till about the drywall phase. Once the walls start to get closed up, at that point is when we're going to start heavily pre-marketing the property. We're doing Facebook ads, just reaching out to everybody, and really, listen, I'm not the best at pre-marketing, but I can tell you one thing is every day I strive to be better at what I do, and I feel like that's what makes, the group that we have different, is that we're always striving to be better. I know I'm not the best, but I want to be the best, and so every day I strive to be better. I strive to improve my remarks on the MLS or Zillow, or get a better person who's creating the 3D rendering, more detail, maybe doing an interior 3D rendering. I just spent $1,200 on a camera so I can take pictures of these projects. I don't know a whole lot of people that are willing to do that, but I want to be the best, and so that's why I do just that.
Nice. I'm writing it down. I think that's great. To make that decision to want to be the best is so important, and I think a lot of people that might be listening to the call, I know some of the people listening to the call have made that decision and are doing the things that need to be done, but I know for a fact there's a lot of people who have not made the decision to be the best at whatever it is that they're setting out to be. So that is a great jewel of wisdom, but I'm going to ask you for a few more, but first, Steve, I wanted to ask you for any book recommendations, maybe your favorite 1, 2, or 3 books that you could recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. And I say this, I'm not a huge book reader. I'm all about, listening to podcasts like yourself or just doing research on the internet, getting out there at networking groups, just grinding, rubbing elbows with people in the business. But the book that really got me started in all this, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I like this book for, people who are thinking of getting in the business. It's just very inspiring, and it's a motivating book, and it's a book that, brought me into this business. So I'd really like to give that book recommendation. Also, Think and Grow Rich, I think that's an all-time favorite of a lot of people's. But again, I'm not a huge book reader. I love listening to Dan Breslin's podcast. So for all you who maybe are just tuning in now, definitely check out his site because he interviews tons of people. And at the end of the day, even if it's something that you're not doing, Dan, I like the people that you interview because they're positive, they're inspiring, and it really says, hey, I can do this too, right? He did it, I can do it. So I thank you for that, Dan.
Absolutely. Thanks for the recommendation there, Steve. Do you have any final jewels of wisdom to share with our listeners?
No, Dan, the only other thing I'd say is, a lot of people want to be successful out there, and I think it's really important to, if you want to be successful, you got to plan. You got to plan your day out, your week out, your year out. You have to know what your goals are. You have to know what you're striving for every day, because if you don't know, you're going to hop on your emails, you're going to randomly check emails, you're going to randomly do things that aren't going to equal a result. But if you truly want to be someone or be something or have a successful business, then you have to be willing to do what those people do on a daily basis. And let me tell you, don't think that they're on Facebook for 2 hours or YouTube for 2 hours. And I'll be the first to say, hey, I get sucked into that just like a lot of people. But you have to be willing to do what they do on a daily basis. And you have to be who they are. right? You have to act successful. You can't walk around in flip-flops and a T-shirt if you're trying to be this successful individual. And you can, don't get me wrong, you can do that, but let me tell you, it's going to be a tough road to success because people don't view that. That's not a presence that, professional, educated people view. So that would be my final jewel of wisdom.
Nice. And how can people get more information about you or Eye Candy Realty if they want to reach out and get in touch with you, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Steve Budzik, pretty easy. You can just Google me. You can Google Eye Candy Realty. I'll even give my cell phone number out, 630-935-0700, and my email is steve@eyecandyhomes.com. But it's not hard to find me. You can find me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, you name it. I'm on every single social media site, but definitely check out our website. You can see all of our inventory, what we're doing. And if you're new to the business, you want to give me a call, you've got questions, I'm happy to answer any and all questions via phone call, email, or text.
Nice. I have a ton of notes here. I got a great insight into the mind of Steve Budzik, so I thank you, Steve, for coming on the show and being so generous with all of your information, tips, and advice here, because I know you guys are making money with the stuff that you shared here. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And to my loyal REI Diamond Show audience, I thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamond Show. If you know anybody else who might enjoy this episode, be sure to forward them a link to this show and tell them they can sign up to receive an email update of each new weekly episode at www.reidiamonds.com. And I'll even send you my special report titled 7 Sources of Off-Market Deals. The website, again, is www.reidiamonds.com. You can also go to that site if you are an interested guest and make an application to come on to the show. You'll see a link at the bottom of the screen there. And our show, the REI Diamond Show, is also listed in iTunes app and other popular podcast apps. Just search REI Diamonds, and it will pop up and you can subscribe. Until next time, this is Dan Breslin signing off.
Thanks for listening to the REI Diamond Interview. To receive the REI Diamonds newsletter and interview monthly, sign up now at www.reidiamonds.com.